My name is Sandhya Prashad. I am a board certified psychiatrist that specializes in interventional psychiatry, and I'm also the president of the American Society of Ketamine Physicians, Psychotherapists, and Practitioners. In fields where, or practice areas really, where we don't have a lot of published data necessarily, and practice actually is outpacing how quickly we're getting published data, it is not uncommon to get a group of experts together to try to establish consensus. So another place that this sometimes happens where they use this particular process of the Delphi analysis is in oncology settings. So sometimes if we wait for the data, it kind of already outpaces what's happening in the clinical practice. So ketamine in particular, IV ketamine or IM ketamine, basically racemic ketamine, is not FDA approved specifically for depression or PTSD or any psychiatric indication. So when we're using it in this fashion, we're using it off label. As a result, there isn't a whole lot of regulatory framework or any kind of framework in which we're able to capture long-term data or best practices. And so that was why we felt that this was really needed. So a Delphi analysis allows us to take a group of experts. So in this case, we took the ASKP 3 faculty, which is a group of experts that we've assembled that have a lot of experience in this space and have a good reputation in this space. And we put together a set of items. So it was 75 items total. And we asked people to rate these items anonymously so that we can over time kind of reach consensus. And we were able to reach consensus on 73 of the 75 items. It's probably worth noting, I'm an author on the paper as well, but there is another expert consensus that is mostly academic physicians, all psychiatrists. Ours is a little different because ASKP 3 is not just psychiatrists, so we're a multidisciplinary organization. So we have anesthesiologists, psychiatrists, ER doctors. We have multiple different specialties, including therapists that took part in this process. Yeah. So ketamine works very differently than any of the other treatments that we have available for depression right now. And there's a couple different theories and a couple different layers on which it works. So one, it works on a very different receptor system, the NMDA receptor. What we think is happening downstream in very simplistic terms is that it is enhancing neuroplasticity, so connectivity of neurons that seems to not be the connectivity that we would desire the configuration that it should be in for, say, PTSD or depression. And ketamine seems to rapidly be able to restore neuroplasticity. Another thought that people will talk about with regards to ketamine that is happening downstream is increasing something called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. I like to think of that as a little bit of like fertilizer for neurons. So it's, again, this thing that's enhancing the neuroplasticity. Ketamine can often have this very rapid anti-suicidal effect, and that is probably its biggest claim to fame. And some of the thought is that things like BDNF are rapidly increasing in the brain and causing that neuronal connectivity, and that may be part of why it's helping in that regard. And then the other thing that gets talked about is with regards to there are these different networks in the brain, so the default mode network. So one thought is that it is working on the default mode network to also help with depression. But those are all very different mechanisms than what we see with traditional antidepressants. So there's no pharmaceutical company that's developing it and gathering that data and publishing it. So for example, when normally when a drug comes to market, there's all of these very rigorous clinical trials that look at efficacy and safety, and the FDA reviews it, and we get this kind of data. With ketamine, because it's an old drug that's just being used off label, we don't have that kind of long-term published data, but it's been used for depression treatment probably for about 15 or 16 years, very routinely in outpatient kind of setting. So you have a group of experts that really have a large body of knowledge about this. But like I said, the practice has really outpaced the published data. The other thing too, the reason we don't have a lot of published data, typically pharmaceutical companies are the ones paying for those trials. It's a very heavy lift to do those kind of trials. And so it's not something that, there really is funding for because of this off-label nature of the treatment.